at Aerial Cities this inaugural panel now since the 4th year, which is like emerging trends and evolution, which pretty much is about answering the question, where are we? You know, where we have been last year, like when we closed Aerial Cities last year, we had some closing remarks, and now we are 1 year later, right? So what happened? And we like to do this always very kind of like from a top down. You know, we have, you know, of course we have EASA, you know, at the European level, we have ENDA at like national level, and then of course Tom and Magda, you know, more of the local level. And we always said at Aerial Cities, the key is to connect all of these levels, right? If they are disconnected, it doesn't work. At some point, you're gonna get stuck somewhere. So I'm very curious to go through this panel, to this event. And before we start, of course, I'd like everybody to introduce themselves. Of course, my name is Lorenzo Murzilli. If you don't know me, that's a problem. Like, you know, this is kind of our event. And, you know, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Murzilli Consulting and also of Aerial Cities and, of course, Drone Talks. Enough about myself. Please, Tom, you go next. I see your slide behind you.
Yeah, my name is Tom Curran. I'm the head of Land Survey and Mapping Division and Corporate Drone Unit within Dublin City Council. And I just want to take this opportunity on behalf of Dublin City Council to welcome everyone, one, to Dublin, and two, to City Hall. This is the seat of the actual the council. So just above and behind you is the actual chamber where the Lord Mayor and the 63 councillors, I hope I got that number right, meet. So you're very welcome to Dublin.
So I'm Enda Walsh. I'm the US manager with the Irish Aviation Authority, and welcome to Dublin also, everyone. I've attended the previous 3 aerial cities now, and I have to say it's a fantastic event, so thanks a million for having it here in Dublin this year. I was saying in Ireland we have a very broad range of UAS activities, from design and manufacturing, public services, deliveries, which some of you have visited MANA there yesterday as well, DG, automated services, all the things we have up here. But we have to keep that industry growing, and that's what we're talking about here today. So if we go on again. There's a number of challenges which Declan touched on, but essentially societal is the big one we're facing now. And you talked about connecting all the levels. That's core to enabling that scaling, and that's where we talked about the national framework policy, but that's about bringing all those levels together, right down from local government all the way to national policy, trying to enable BVLOS, and we get into that in this panel, ultimately all working together to scale the industry as we go on. As Declan touched on, I won't go into them again, but I said that the national policy framework we have published is the first policy step in that direction, and implementing it then we've had the Drone Innovation Partnership, which, as you say, connecting the levels from the regulators to academia to local government to operators on the ground.
So I work for the city of Gdańsk, 500,000 city in northern Poland. It's my first time to Aerial Cities. Thank you for having me. And it's our 3rd year of implementing CTAM project, when we try to prepare cities for sustainable urban air mobility. And we envision our role as making sure that the development happens in a sustainable manner towards the best interest of our residents. We are a replicator city, learning from lead cities such as Helsinki, Hamburg, and Stockholm. And within this last final year, we have the most significant role. So we surveyed 4,000 residents on their acceptance towards urban air mobility. We've piloted use cases in my personal field of mobility and transport. We made sure that unprotected traffic participants are safe from like motorized traffic. We carried out audits around primary schools. We supported local police, checking out the most common intersections to commit driving offenses. And basically, we are now in a week time already, meeting with municipal stakeholders to develop an action plan. What's next, where to go further with urban air mobility in our municipality. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. It's very impressive, the location, especially from here. Yeah, very nice. So, Natale Di Rubbo, drone project manager in EASA. I'm working now since 10 years in EASA. And I have one goal. I see that most of the time when we see presentation that policy or regulation is in the challenge slide. I would like to move to the enabler slide. So what we are trying to do in EASA is to try to coordinate activity with all the authorities, European authorities, but also with industry. And this year, I think that one very successful story was to put together the board of industry that is now advising EASA, so using the standard process we have for other aviation topics. So now also for drones, we have a formal coordination with industry where industry can come to EASA, identify what are the challenges, support us in developing solutions. So we are now trying to develop simplification when needed, because we know that now after the experience that we gathered in these years, we can simplify some elements of the regulation, but also to identify means of compliance that we can support you as industry or you as authority to receive or issue an authorization in the specific category.
Excellent, thank you, Natale. And I want to start with you. As I said, let's go top down from Europe to state to local. And like the key question of this panel is pretty much like, where are we? All right, like if you need to take stock of the last couple of years for you, I mean, and look at the situation that you perceive, from EASA, from Cologne, it's like, where are we with the integration of this technology in cities, in states? What is the feedback that you receive, from your constituents, right, and your stakeholders? Give us kind of a top-level view of the industry from EASA's perspective.
We are having a regular meeting with the authority and with industry in order to identify what are the challenges and to see why we don't see at this moment drones flying outside of the window. So we had some good enabler. So you are aware that SORA 2.5 was published also in the European system. So the ground risk part now is very well established. We also published some material in support of the application of SORA 2.5, especially the maps for population density. So the challenge from the ground, so how to assess the ground risk now, I think, is solved. What we still are missing is the air risk part. So we are still waiting since now years on having a detect and avoid that is reliable enough, that can be used in order to separate from other traffic. And now we were having hopes since a long time to have something available, but we think that maybe we should find other solutions. So we are trying to work on collecting feedback from authority on how they are operating in the different states, how especially you address the air risk. And we know that our final solution that we want to have is the use space. However, use space still, it takes some time to be deployed. Maybe we don't want to have use space everywhere. Maybe we don't need to have use space everywhere. So what we need is to try to identify some solutions that will enable, maybe even with small scale operations, some experience that then we can gain. And also we can show to the investors that there is a market, because we know that there is a market, and especially here in Dublin, we have some very good experience. So we would like, starting from the experience that you are collecting here in Dublin, to expand, to export the solution outside of Dublin, outside of Ireland. Maybe there are also, we know there are also other good solutions in other parts of Europe. So EASA now is going to develop a guidelines where we put together the lesson learned, best practice coming from these kind of nations, and offer to the authority. And then we can say, maybe you cannot authorize multiple drones operating in the same area at the same time without use space. But so let's start with have non-scalable operation. We gain experience, starting from the city, because this is where the city, we have the higher potential for economic. And then little by little expand as soon as we learn. Then the investor will understand that this is a good market. They will come with fresh money. More operator will be interested to operate in the city. And then we have a mass to really make available all the use space service. Because at the end, when we have multiple drones, the only solution that we find in order to address the air risk is the use space. So this is today the biggest challenge, how to enable this BVLOS operation starting from the city.
All right, Thank you very much. And Enda, the bar is not very high. Pretty much he said, tell us what to do, and we're going to expand it. So how do you answer to this challenge? And what is the situation in Ireland? I mean, we've heard very good news, less good news, depending on where you look. So, give us a bit of a, is there hope to go to EASA and make it
So
happen?
we were just discussing before we were having the coffee there about how far the industry has come over the past 4 years, even since Aerial Cities began. And much like Europe, but in Ireland as well, the industry is very healthy and they want to grow, and they want to grow rapidly, but there are certain things standing in their way. And hit on the air risk there, which is a big element. How do we enable BVLOS flights? There's huge demand for not only deliveries, which is the one everyone knows about, but linear inspections. We have to get out and enable it in Class G, not just Class C. And as you said, U-Space will be the ultimate solution, but you said you may not want to put it everywhere. So what are the interim steps? We have a solution there with MANA, which works fine for a single operator, but again, not scalable. So we have to bring U-Space in, and there are other avenues we can tackle it as well, as you mentioned, detect and avoid, but also increasing the conspicuity of GA to enable it in Class G. So you have work in that regard, such as the ADS Flight 4 mobile standard coming out, which should, even possibly we can roll that out a lot quicker in that regard as well. So as the regulators, we have to look at how can we encourage these incremental steps while we're working rapidly to try and bring U-Space in. But then the other big issue then is societal acceptance. So drones, a lot of the work isn't seen by a lot of the public, surveys, etc., whereas the obvious companies, MANA is seen by everyone. It's very visible, and it's a big change in technology. That technology will get normalized over time, but there's a big body of work to ensure that it's normalized the correct way. And as you mentioned, it's about bringing all those stakeholders together to make sure you have robust policy in place, clear policy in place that operators can meet as well, and that we engage robustly with the public. So they're not concerned about privacy or noise, that there's clear answers for them.
All right. So from your perspective, I see these two blocks emerging, right? One is how do we deal with the air risk? How do we deal with integration for BVLOS at scale? Because we can do it, but not yet at scale. And the other one, if we even try to go at scale, the more you try to scale, the more people will eventually complain unless you don't deal with them, right?
Correctly.
And I think this is where we have the two cities here to learn from you, because I always say, we in aviation, we like to talk about airplanes all the time. We are all aviation enthusiasts, and we would like to put airplanes and drones everywhere. But the cities and the citizens don't care at all, right? So it doesn't really matter that we keep pushing our technology to them. I think there is the challenge of okay, how does the cities embrace it? It's almost like a pull on the other direction. So I'm very curious to understand. Let's start with Tom as a host of. I give you the precedence, and I'm just curious to see what is the city perspective on this.
Public embracement is one of our major topics. One of the things we are working on. What we have to push is just to make people aware. MANA aren't the only people who fly drones in Dublin. We as a city council, we have our drone unit, we carry out operations, our fire service are carrying out operations, and that's part of the public embracement. It's to say, look, there are drones for good, there are drones aiding Dublin City Council and other local governments to provide our services. So part of that is public embracement. We've carried out a number of surveys just to get the feedback on that. What do the public think? We've also gone public. We were at the Bray Air Show in August, once again, to push drones for public service. But yeah, it is a challenge. One, trying to get to talk to people, get to meet them. How do we get to them other than social media? There's only so many people on social media, or there's certain generation or age or who will just not engage with social media. So it's how do we talk to them? How do we get their feedback?
Yeah, they're the noisiest sometimes. The one that have more time to complain, right? So it's definitely a challenge. I can see that. All right, and from your perspective, Magda, you mentioned you just at the end of a 3 years program where actually you went through this process of surveying and understanding what the people think. What can you tell us? What have you learned?
Oh, I've learned a lot, but first of all, we have to start with residents. In order for them to embrace the technology, we need to educate them, make them aware. And we did it in 2 rounds. So a year and a half ago, we had the first round of public acceptance survey with 2,600 residents replying to newsletter, where we invited them to interactive survey. We've learned that the acceptance of drones is already quite high, that every second resident of Gdansk, and it's a representative survey because we waited the results with research agency, had some personal experience with drones, not meaning that necessarily this person operated a drone, because those are maybe few percentage points, but has some connection through family, through social media, through professional life. People are not overly concerned. However, when we carried out the second round of surveys this September, after the invasion of Russian drones into Polish airspace, people were more on edge. So acceptance in certain fields dropped by a few percentage points already after that invasion. We were even advised not to carry out the research and maybe wait how the situation develops, but sadly, we couldn't wait, and the war behind our borders is ongoing. So we just proceeded to learn what people really think. The greatest concern is breach of privacy, misuse of drones for criminal activity, or threat to national safety. People are not concerned about potential increase of prices when drone services become commercial. They are not overly concerned about aesthetics or visual pollution. They might be somewhat concerned about noise pollution. However, the scale in Gdansk in Poland is not that huge yet. It's very popular to fly a drone even if you're a child. For photojournalists and photographers, I know quite a few, and I don't know a single one that wouldn't have a drone operator license. Well, but anyways, we try to learn what people think, then to try to map knowledge gaps in our municipality. Starting 3 years ago, we mapped the departments that need to be involved and formed a local steering committee by mayor's executive order, so that they couldn't say no to us and couldn't say, well, I won't support this project. And at this stage, the conclusion is we still need to learn, because the technology develops really quickly. We don't manage our airspace, but we are the first contact point for residents. So if anything happens, the Gdansk contact center that operates 24/7 replying to residents' inquiries needs to be ready, needs to know whom to contact. They shouldn't just have to Google that there is the CTAM project carried out by our unit. They need to know where drone competencies lay within municipality. We trained 20 persons within the municipality, different departments, that passed the drone operator exams. And, we await for the development and have high ambitions for the years to come.
To me, it's exciting. Of course, there are a lot of problems, but if I remember the early edition of Aerial Cities, when we were even trying to get the cities in, and they didn't really want to come. It's like, we don't care about it. And now we are talking about, training, dozens of city employees to be able to deal with drones. So I think the progress is kind of significantly there. Of course, the more you progress, then you hit the barriers that you need to solve. But I mean, it's a kind of cool that the cities are looking at this as something I, as a city, have to be involved with, because if I don't do anything or nothing, it's just not going to happen, which is to me almost like, this event is called Aerial Cities for a reason, right? It's Aerial Cities, because the cities have to get involved. So it's kind of refreshing to hear that the cities are getting involved, right? I wanted to ask Natale one question about this. Of course, from an EASA perspective, you're not generally necessarily concerned with the, city internal dynamics, But is there anything going on within EASA to address any of these concerns from a societal point of view, privacy, all these internal mechanisms? Or at the moment, you're really mainly focused on the air risk, and that's the priority?
Even if, so yeah, EASA, the S is for safety in the middle. No, actually, we are trying to find enabler for the drone sector. And one of the main points will be to ensure that there is public acceptance, and also that we help municipality, states to organize innovative air mobility service. So you may be aware that we published on our website the Innovative Air Mobility Hub that has the purpose to provide all the information. At the beginning was mentioned more exactly for the cities, municipality, how they can organize this kind of service. Then we expanded to also to support operators, to how to reach an authorization. So you may be aware that even now, last month, we published the module, for example, the eSORA, where the SORA can be developed, can be done through the system. So we are having a regular discussion with municipality. We have one project manager that is dedicated only to this activity, and we will be an important element to identify also what are all kinds of requirements. For example, noise. We are also working on noise to identify how to measure noise, how to organize also, or give indication to the different municipalities how they can improve the public acceptance. So it's something that EASA is following and is still in coordination with all the other authorities. Yeah.
Excellent. And I don't want to anticipate what we're going to hear in the further panels, you know. But one thing is for sure, the pressure is increasing, right? You know, people are hot because, like, it feels that the tech is there, right? I mean, although not fully aggregated yet, but if people say, do you have UTM? Yes, I do. Can I do delivery at scale? Yes, I do. Can I do all of these things? And it seems like everybody is waiting for the magic wand and that something all happens, right? And I think this is, everybody's looking at NAAs, right? Because to some extent, I think EASA is there, like, trying to harmonize and, of course, provide guidance. But ultimately, like we were mentioning, if you have to establish a use space, you have to establish a use space, right? If you have to deal with, you know, to help the cities to deal with societal acceptance, well, you have to get engaged, right? So you're a pretty busy man, and the question is, like, from your perspective, I know that the pressure is increasing, you know, it's kind of clear. Do you also see kind of an increase in, like, understanding of your role, your function, how important it is, and how you can actually work to support the industries? Is that, like, do you have also a top-down, I mean, we heard, of course, from Declan, right? But do you feel that, like, are you empowered to do what has to be done?
Yeah,
because you are kind of the lead nation these days, right? So if you don't have that, then we are in dire straits.
Well, rather than my role, what I'd say, there's a much greater understanding of the drone industry in general, of the issues around it, and a desire to tackle them and solve them. I have to, EASA mentioned the support they give to cities. So, for example, EASA were down with us yesterday, just down the road here, running a workshop with city councils, planners, policing, and so on, trying to get a cross-agency approach to these issues. So great support from EASA. And again, at a state level, it's about bringing in all those players to develop a robust policy, you know, because regulators aren't policymakers. So we provide advice, and the state needs a robust policy around that. And I'm delighted, as Declan mentioned, our national policy framework is trying to reach out and tackle all these issues, from enforcement to use space, you know, to societal acceptance as well.
How important is that framework? I wanted to ask you, because, like, you are not probably the only one, but it's a pretty unique framework that exists, where you're saying, like, at national level, we're going to try to harmonize it. So how important was that framework? Tell us a little bit more, also for those who might want to, you know, do something similar, either authorities or lobby for something similar. What is it?
It was crucial. So it started a number of years ago, where we brought together a lot of the key players from, like I said, local authorities, policing, national parks and wildlife, Department of Transport, and so on. And we discussed these three main topics of, you know, airspace and planning. That's ground also. Enforcement issues and enterprise and innovation, laying all the problems out on the table. How are these problems affecting the different agencies, and what kind of policy decisions need to come in place to solve these issues? So that was published a couple of months ago with some key action items out of it. For example, the establishment of use space, because we can see now in Dublin the level of BVLOS flights is growing to a volume where we can't just use our interim solutions for one operator. How do we enable planning authorities to know what to ask even if someone comes with a planning application for a drone hub, you know. So the EASA IAM hub, the work they're doing, noise contouring can feed into that as well, you know. How can we have better enforcement? Because people's concerns, as you mentioned, about how drones are used for ill intent, so how can we tackle that better? And how do we encourage industry overall under the enterprise and innovation? So it was a real broad spread. What are all the issues affecting every level, and what actions do we need to do? So with that policy statement published, we now have the impetus to go along and implement the ones that are applicable to ourselves.
Excellent. So that's kind of, it gives you now the power to go and do things. Very good. I have a question actually for both of you from a city perspective, because, you know, and I think you hinted before, Tom, at this, is like, I don't want this to only look at the problems. I mean, we know there are problems, but like also at not necessarily opportunities, but like on the positives that you are seeing inside the city, right? You mentioned the city is using drones, the city is deploying them. We're gonna have user panel perspective following on. But I just wanted to ask both of you is like, is it really only problems here, like we're talking about, or the city also sees the potential, the opportunity, and is working almost proactively, right? Because they see the benefit of the technology.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned some of the services that we are providing, but the whole rollout of drones is seen from our point of view as a positive. Even like Mana from their innovation point of view, you know, and the technology point of view, that's great. That pushes the whole technology aspect forward. But it's getting the message across. Like we work for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 different sections within City Council at the moment. We want to expand those services to other sections, other departments. Just going back to what Enda mentioned about the policy framework agreement with local authorities. So the Department of Transport, who obviously published it, are fully on board. EASA, IA are fully on board. Our issue with that, though, is the other departments. It's getting the Department of Justice, Department of Environment around planning regulations and stuff like that. That's, I know, slightly off topic, but they're the issues. I just wanted to refer to that after Enda mentioned it. But no, as I said, we see drones in a very, very positive light for providing services to the city.
Excellent. And from your perspective, do you think in Gdansk is this going to be is the same, or like from what you have felt?
Well, I feel that there is huge enthusiasm within municipal structures. Even before we started the project, the deputy mayor requested that municipal guards purchase the drones for, you know, monitoring the illegal dump sites of the waste or illegal trade on the streets of the old town of Gdansk. When we invite people to local training events organized within the framework of the project, for instance, on GIS tool for landing and takeoff sites, we then hear that there are so many grassroots initiatives within departments. So we have one urban planner on a local steering committee, but within this urban planning unit, there are like several hobbyist drone operators, and they want to join the training as well. We send out an invitation to an event when we want to create public acceptance, and we are being asked, can more people come from our department, because we have 5 volunteers. There were many use cases suggested by our employees when we wanted to pilot the use case within the framework of the project. So people said, well, we would use drones for tree stand monitoring within Gdansk roads and greenery management. Well, we can use it to deliver documents between multiple municipal buildings. We can use it to support search actions with local police. And we just had to choose some use cases. We chose 2 within the field of mobility and transport, that there are so many more to come.
Excellent. Again, as I said, this is, to me, it's a very, I don't know, normally aerial cities, at the beginning of the event, it was a bit gloomy because the perspective was not so good. Like, people were not so exciting, especially cities. I think this year is quite different. I think the cities are really on the topic and trying to help and solve and embrace the technology. And of course, you are kind of in between and trying to make all happen. But I think it's a very, very good way to open the conference, like to kind of acknowledge that the cities are willing and able, or getting able, to use the technology, to handle the technology, to embrace eventually and to communicate with their citizens, listen to their concerns. I think this is quite different from even from last year. I feel it's kind of a step forward, but as you can see from the slide, and I mean that's your QR code. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. There is as soon as you mention the word DAA, Natale, it's kind of a classic, right? And so let's go quickly through the topic of DAA, and I would like to fuse the first two questions, right? Because on the one hand, DAA is hard, right? And the concept of good enough and good enough for whom and how, that's one thing. And of course, the other part of the question there is, yes, DAA is not going to solve the problem. We kind of all know that, right? Or at least it feels like that. So what about EC? Can we make people conspicuous so that this problem kind of alleviates a little bit? And what are we waiting for pulling the trigger? Now, we have done it in new space, to be fair, right? But because new space is not happening, we're kind of so can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, very good question. So now the detect and avoid at this moment, we need to find a system that provides the needed reliability, availability, demonstrate that it's able to detect correctly in different situations, different kind of obstacle, and then especially other aircraft. And at this moment, finding a solution that is demonstrating to reach this target level of safety that we need for this kind of operation is a little bit challenges. And also because then you want to have something that is small enough, it can be also fit on small drones. Yeah, it takes still a little bit of time. The electronic conspicuity is another element. It is an important element. So you may be aware that EASA is pushing on a project that is called ADS Lite. So it's a system where we try to put together information coming from ADS-B. So ADS-B is the experience that we normally have for commercial aircraft, but also on the one that is on the small general aviation, like FLARM or other system working on the same frequency. And now we're trying even to introduce also in the same under the same projects also the network identification for drones, or even some app that may be on mobile phone, so that parachuters maybe they will have normally a mobile phone. So through this app they can emit their position. So first of all, we need to make sure that from a technical point of view, we complete the process. And we published last month an update of the performance of the ADS Lite. So we are getting there to identify what could be the technical solution. Different is how to mandate that all users in the airspace should have an eco-conspicuity system. So there is at this moment some discussion both at the Commission, but more so also at the state level, how we can mandate that all general aviation should have a conspicuity system always on. Will be a bit is a political discussion that's now it will be difficult to solve here because there are several other interests. So now we are focusing first of all to identify something that is feasible, cheap, that can be installed by all user, general aviation and drone as well, and then all the information can be integrated. This is what we are focusing. And then we'll offer as enabler when we can then find condition where all users should have, at least in an airspace, use space, they need to have a conspicuity, but maybe we can say if you want to have operation in the city, maybe then the authority can still identify transport mandatory zone. But now we are trying to approach on the solution, ADS Lite.
Okay, so EASA bet is on ADS Lite, and then eventually the conspicuity mandate if and when, and how. But you're right in the sense that you can establish TMZs without having a nationwide conspicuity mandate, right? So you would change the TMZ to also be okay for ADSL, and then, okay, I understand that. There is a question about, I don't know, skills and workforce training and alignment of the academic institution to all of those new concepts. I don't know who wants to take that. I think what the question is referring to is that, again, aviation people, we keep talking about our, in our own circle, right? But there are more people that are now have to be trained and upskilled, right? The city planners, the academic institution may need to have drone programs. Do you see, I don't know, whoever wants to take the question, do you see positive development in that sense, or we are still kind of a closed system and we're just talking about,
There's still a bit of work to be done on that.
Yeah.
It's trying to get it into the third level, universities, colleges, to have these programs introduced. It'll be a while before it's like a drone pilot type thing or a drone operator as a course, but we need it introduced as part of some sort of training course, be it aviation, like my background surveying, because I know that's how we started from a surveying point of view. But then from an academic point of view, like the Drone Innovation Partnership has been mentioned a few times, and that's a partnership ourselves, Irish Aviation Authority and Maynooth University. So the academic institutes are aware from a research point of view. So that's positive, but training the next generation or the people who are going to replace us other than AI, it's important that we get that rolled out in the educational world.
I would say, though, that academic institutions are very aware and very involved in the drone industry, and some of the research that's going on, not only in Ireland but broader, is fascinating. And there is a role there for authorities in terms of helping to educate where we're asked. I'm speaking to the public drone network in a couple of weeks as well. Yeah. And that's part of it, and we speak to planners when they have questions as well. So there is a strong role for regulators in helping to educate the wider populace.
Excellent. We are almost at time, but I wouldn't be myself, because exactly, we are a little bit later. Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that there is a need for good practice exchange and more integration, because there are so many good initiatives, even locally, around Gdansk that we weren't aware of. So we trained employees from several departments, but we then learned that there is a local vocational school that had actually been educating students to be drone mechanics and drone operators for quite a few years now. When we learned about them, we invited them to cooperate with the project, and they're the most active participant of our events and within our communication channels. So sometimes within the local surrounding, we don't even know what's going on. And it's worthwhile to brag about it, really, because when we communicate about the project, people come, and a person came and said, "I'm an aerial, traffic expert, especially when it comes to collisions with birds, but also on other topics. Can I share my knowledge with the project?" And we invited him to the local steering committee, and he told us what the accidents look above Gdansk and what we can learn from.
Excellent. So a lot of grassroots initiatives that you need to be made aware of so that you can integrate again into this overall thing. And I mean, I would have been myself if I wouldn't ask that question about U-Space, UTM. It's kind of I don't know. I can answer this myself, but I will not do it. So the question is, do we really need U-Space in its current form, I would add, or would a basic UTM service be more helpful to solve the air risk problem? So I'm gonna really abstain from answering. I'm really struggling now. But please, maybe Enda first, and then maybe.
Yeah. So U-Space is the end goal, and once it's in place, it enables everything. But we do have to look for iterative or interim solutions in the meantime. Be that transponder mandatory zones where we ensure conspicuity, or like we're doing in Class G, coordination with ATC to mitigate the air risk. So regulators do have to be pragmatic in trying to find solutions until we have U-Space fully established. I don't think we should be looking at a light alternative, say, as the end goal. We have to go towards what's in 664, but we do have to be pragmatic in those interim steps, so we're not stagnating the industry while they're waiting for that.
So that's a good point. Let me make sure that I understand. So you're saying, I understand that U-Space is at the end stage, right? But the SORA kind of allows, whatever mitigation you have, right, to make your air risk case. And you're like, yeah. I'm open as an NAA to listen to whatever is that you are proposing, absent the U-Space, and accept eventually that as a way to mitigate the air risk.
Absolutely correct. Right, where it may not be scalable for multiple operators in the one space, it is enabling people to do some very interesting operations, and we have to be open to those proposals.
But you're open to that, because I remember a couple of months ago you asked me, how are we doing this BVLOS operation in the airspace, right? And the answer was well, using the SORA, mitigation things. But Do you see NAAs, again, coming back to the question, like, do you see NAAs embracing the concept that the SORA doesn't say you need the use space, but it says there are all these series of mitigations that you can use if you can make a safety case? Do you see from your side authorities embracing that concept, or it's more like use space or nothing?
So use space is a mitigation of SORA.
Yeah, exactly.
So exactly. So and is one mitigation. We can find some additional mitigation. Now the problem is that how do you separate between the traffic of multiple drones in the same area? So that is the problem that we have. At this moment, we see that when there will be higher traffic, then the solution is the use space, because this is the only way that we can really ensure that that also after the collision of two drones, then you don't have even a ground risk on the ground. So we are, as I said before, we are now identifying some solution that will be as an alternative to use space when there is either a very, very low number of operators, or maybe we can identify a threshold. Actually, we have also some study from CESAR that will help us to identify thresholds when we can have, when use space will be the solution that will help us to identify, to reach target level of safety, and where we can have something alternative. But we need to learn to gain experience. So this is why it will be important to now, in next year, to focus on this operation in the cities with support of authorities.
Excellent. And I think now we are actually at time. So thank you very much for this opening panel. I mean, what I've learned is that, you know, people are working very hard, right? And thank you. And I mean, what I've learned as well is that the problems are kind of clearly identified, right? It's not very foggy anymore. We know exactly what is stopping us. We know what we want to do. And I mean, there is excitement towards progress. So thank you very much again.